Здравейте. Hello. I'm going to talk to you today about starting in Bulgaria, the myths and legends of doing that. My name is Adel Zakout. I'm an architect and entrepreneur. I was born and went to school in Dubai. My mother is Bulgarian and I actually loved coming to Bulgaria during one of my holidays. I studied architecture in London and 2 years ago I decided to move back, or to actually move and try out in Bulgaria. So, I got my first computer, I think it was 94, 95. It was a 486, and I kind of tinkered with it all day. The first time I used the internet was in 97. My homepage was Yahoo, that was my favorite site. And I fell in love with the internet. I started kind of building my own websites. GeoCities existed then, and I kind of started, just building my own kind of personal websites for no apparent reason. Almost every business that I've done has somehow been linked to the internet, apart from Boom Burgers, which may change. And basically every business I've done has also somehow been linked to Bulgaria, which actually when I was doing the presentation over the past couple of days I realized. So, company number one in 1999. I was 13, it was the 9th grade, and it was a couple of years after I got my first computer. Basically, I wanted more cash than my parents would give me in my allowance. My father wouldn't give me any more. I wanted to buy a laptop because my computer was kind of getting a bit old-fashioned. I wanted a nice kind of thick laptop to carry around with me. And during the summer holidays in Sofia, one of my favorite places was Slovakia. I used to kind of browse through books there, for days. But I used to browse for books and CDs. CDs, at that time when there were all these guys kind of selling movies, music, etc. So I thought that could be an interesting business idea. There were no CDs in Dubai. Company one, the business plan was to buy CDs from Slovakia, take them to Dubai, copy them, some movies, music, etc., and then sell them in school. And it worked. Basically, very soon after that, I had multiple CD copiers in my house. My classmates were my distribution network. I was selling, tens of CDs per day. Legally questionable for the lawyers. And yeah, it worked. I then kind of started, downloading stuff online and copying it on CDs, and it was a great operation when I was like, 14, 15. And I managed to buy my laptop, which was great. I actually achieved it by myself. Company 1.5, it's a half because you'll find out why in a second, but this was in the summer of 2001. I used to go to a lot of the network games cafes, and I used to play Counter-Strike, as probably a good chunk of us have. And I thought, that's a cool idea. Why don't I open up my own internet cafe? It's, why not? So the business plan was to open one in Sofia, although I was in school and, lived in Dubai and was in Sofia 2 or 3 times a year. I decided that it was a good idea. Basically, we negotiated, or a couple of friends got together, we said, yeah, we're going to do it. We needed some cash, and our parents kind of said, yeah, whatever, here's some cash. And we negotiated a great deal on 20 computers. That was kind of what we wanted to start with. But it required a $4,000 deposit. So, we put down the deposit. But our guy, Sufi was his name, or nickname, he screwed us over. He never sold computers all the money, he basically took it and ran. So yeah, that's why it's half a company. Company number 2, in 2002 to 2003. Basically, in school we had a program that's similar to the Junior Achievement Award in Bulgaria. It's called the Young Enterprise Scheme, and basically you're asked to run a company within school with the support of your teachers, and it's a real company. I mean, you have to produce a real product and then sell it. And during these years, Dubai was kind of going through its tourism boom. It was like growth was crazy. There were millions of tourists going to Dubai. So I had an idea. The idea was to create an interactive guide to buy on CD. So it was a CD where there'd be photos, videos, restaurant recommendations, you know, everything that you want to know when you're kind of going or maybe to take back as a souvenir. And it was all on this kind of beautiful CD. The issue was though that we were a group of like 6, 7 people, and there's this other kid in the group, and he was much cooler than me. You know, I was the guy that was selling CDs, and this was the guy that was, you know, the cool guy. And he didn't want to do the CD. He had an idea to do T-shirts. He wanted to print T-shirts. So that was, you know, I kind of still fought for it. And in the end, we did CDs, but he was CEO of the company, which, you know, I had to kind of bite. So the business plan was to create an interactive guide to Dubai and basically sell the CD across the retail network in Dubai, in bookstores and supermarkets and so on. The first challenge was to find a good designer, a good developer to create the CD. I mean, the CD had to be Flash-based. I didn't know how to code or design in Flash. And that was actually the thing that the cool kid was really, you know, we're never going to be able to do this, like, there's no way that we can produce the CD by ourselves, etc. So, the first thing I did was to open up IRC, the chat thing that we all used to use a couple of years ago. And I used to use it to talk to my friends in Bulgaria, to talk to family in Bulgaria. So I joined the Bulgarian channel, and I joined Flash on IRC, which is a channel where Flash geeks hang out. And I found this guy with a nickname called Malvin. Malvin had a small studio in Plovdiv. He was a designer, and he did Flash stuff. So we struck a deal where he basically did the CD for free, everything that we wanted. And in return, I'd stick his logo on the back of the CD. Malvin today is my close friend and business partner from the Adel Zakout. He is also the co-founder of Spark. Yeah, and that kind of started off, you know, in school through IRC, through some kind of weird project. So we ended up selling thousands of copies of the CD. We would cold call during break times in school. Basically, after school, we kind of put together these lists of bookstores and, you know, supermarkets and so on, and we kind of find who the right person to speak to was, and we just start calling them. You know, while everyone else was kind of playing in the playground or whatever, we were on the phone selling our CD. And it was really strange in the beginning because, you know, we're a bunch of 16, 17-year-old guys selling CDs to like big chains in Dubai. But it worked. Our CD was sold in Virgin Megastores. It was sold in the kind of really big bookstore chains in Dubai. We sold thousands. And in the end, Emirates Airlines really loved the CD, and they wanted to integrate the CD into their in-flight systems. So on the back of the chairs in Emirates Airlines, every seat has a screen, and they wanted to be able to, you know, put it on there so that people, when they're in their flight, can find out about it. And they wanted to buy the company. That didn't happen because we had like A-level exams, and we had to basically focus on that, and it kind of died down. After that, I moved to London to study architecture, and in London, I really wanted to impress this girl. And my way of impressing her was by kind of taking her to restaurants, taking her to Paris, you know, all that kind of stuff. And it was very expensive, and I was just a student. So my father had sent me cash for the whole year. At the beginning of my education, he said, you know, this is your money for your whole year. It needs to last you until June, and deal with it. I finished it in 4 months. And I called him to ask for more, but he said no. So it's like, oh shit, how am I going to pay for my rent, for my food, you know, the basic stuff. I went back to IRC and I wrote to Aulata, and I said, I need cash. And we're going to start a business together. So I had an idea. He was this really good web designer. I was kind of tinkering with the internet and web design and graphic design for ages. So We're going to create lots of websites for cheap in Bulgaria, and we're going to sell them to clients in the US. That was the whole business plan. The idea was to find clients online. Lucio and I were going to both design, and then we're going to find people to kind of code them and so on. We found our first project on this forum called webhostingtalk.com. This forum where basically the web hosting, the owners of web hosting companies kind of chat. Our first client was a company called lehost.net. I think it still exists as a company. There's a guy called Pierre, and I mean, you never forget that kind of first client that emails you and says, I want a website, or I want X. So, Lucio and I started designing. We both designed a version of the lehost website, but they liked his more. And that kind of trend continued for a couple of sites after that. So in the end, we decided that he'd stick to the design and I'd stick to the business. And he was much better at me than that. Later on, I met Dan Ishman. Dan Ishman is founder or co-founder of a company called Mid-Phase. Later on, we founded singlehop.com. Mid-Phase is probably one of the most successful web hosting companies in the US. I'm not sure if it exists anymore. He basically sold. And singlehop is probably today one of the biggest dedicated hosting providers in the US. It's an Inc. 500 company, absolutely huge. Of course, when I met him, he was kind of tiny and he just started, and he was like a 23, 4 or 5-year-old guy in his basement. So, after all that, there was a guy called Shahan. And one day I opened up my email and I had this message from a guy called Shahan. Shahan wanted us to design one site. And, there was a bit of a kind of moral dilemma, but we thought, yeah, I think he's paying as well, so we did it. We started designing porn sites for him. And there was one porn site, then it was 5 porn sites, then it was 10 porn sites. And in the end, as a company, we specialized in web hosting sites and porn sites. A couple of weeks after that, or a couple of months after that, we were a team of 5 people. This is all whilst I was studying in London, and we were designing like 2 sites a day, part of which were porn sites. But we were still working with the web hosting guys, and one of the biggest deals that we did at that point was with Mid-Phase, the company that Dan owns, or Dan owned. Basically they had millions of clients, and we decided that we're going to try to package a design service where we would sell, for a fixed fee, $555, a 5-page website, and we do it in 5 days. So it's the Mid-Phase 555 deal. And we created this cool landing page, got it up online, had an order form where you could order and pay. In the first week, we had 40 websites that were ordered, which was a lot of money, especially then. And basically, Lucio was a ninja. He'd kind of, be working from morning till 3, 4, 5 a.m. in designing these websites, also including the porn, which was a bit of an issue. We were running around in cash, basically. It was great.